is going on, guys? Kamon here. Today I'm going to bring you guys a Swordsoul discussion. We're going to talk about, can Swordsoul compete in this current meta in the TCG? And the answer is yes, I think it can. Let's get right into it, alright? Rescue Ace is a pretty good deck. I think Swordsoul can do super well versus it, especially going first. Going second, it might have like a tougher time, especially if they get off their Hydrant into their Turbulence combo, because then he'll set 4 cards to interrupt you. But again, depending on the hand you have, you can combat that in the best way possible, if that makes sense. So therefore, like, I know they can set like four cards, like one can stop you from like summoning, Book of Moon, etc., right? But you play so many like extenders in this deck, I think you can most likely try to play around every little thing, because you do run each Tenyi, you do have the Long Yuang in your hand, you do have the Ecclesia, plus most builds nowadays we are running a lot of hand traps. Even my current build now, I am running a lot of hand traps, which you guys will see that profile, by the way, either tomorrow and or before this, one of those, however I'm feeling. But yeah, so overall, I think like you can try to outplay it. Going second is definitely a lot harder than it has to be, but going first, half of the time, I think Swordsoul does a phenomenal job at just stopping Rescue Ace, because if you stop their Hydrant from coming out, you're good to go. And or better yet, if you do stop their Rescue Ace Turbulence from using his effect, then you are good to go from there. But now let's go on to the deck number 2 that I think isn't so bad. All right, deck number 2 is definitely Purrely. Purrely was one of those decks to where like it just does it does so much. But again, as we are playing Swordsoul, depending on the hand trap lineup, depending on the meta, that is what really defines what you want to do versus Purrely specifically. Purrely will auto lose to Droll and Lockbird, and that's only if they activate their stuff during the main phase. Half of the time, Purrely does activate their stuff during the like draw phase and or standby phase, so therefore Droll is dead. But again, that depends on what hand traps you are running. Like if you're running Imperm, Ash Blossom, stuff like that, Ghost Ogre, like stuff like that can possibly stop them from doing a lot, if that makes sense. But again, I think Droll is like the deciding factor of Purrely. Another thing, I'm pretty sure the Purrely Noir, I believe it's unaffected by the effect of like activated effects. So therefore, if you have a lingering effect, it can still affect them. So therefore, your Chang Ying can still affect that. I'm pretty sure that's how that ruling works. If not, let me know in the comments. But I'm pretty because like I know you can hit a Noir with a Fog Blade, and then the Fog Blade will stop it, because like that's like a constant effect. So yeah, so obviously going first here, stopping the little Purrely guys from doing anything, very big, very major. Going second, it might be, I don't think it's impossible to play around a big material Noir, especially if you open up with just a bunch of monsters like in your hand, like again your freaking Tenyis, your freaking Swordsoul extenders, your Ecclesia, like a lot of those they have to like really think. Like if you open up a Shuna on activation, you summon a Shuna, they off rip have to like think then and there, oh, should I spin this Ashuna or not? Then if they do spin it, you can possibly have a Talent in your hand, you can have a Circle in your hand, you know what I mean? Like you can have anything in your hand, and then every time they do spin something, that is wasting materials on their Noir, so therefore you can affect it by other things, you know what I mean? So again, I do not think the Purrely matchup is the worst matchup in the world, but I'm not saying it's easy, but I don't think it's like, oh, we auto lose. So again, I think Swordsoul does do pretty well versus Purrely. Now let's go to the deck number 3. Deck number 3 is Infernoble. I don't know too much about this deck, I'm gonna be completely honest, but I know they could just make a lot of crazy boards. So I'm not gonna speak too much on Infernoble, because again, I did not know too much about them. But from the boards that I have seen, I still believe Swordsoul can play around it and or break it. Because my biggest thing about certain decks that I do play, I do want to make sure that if I play against a meta deck, my deck can still fight it. Even if I still lose, I want to make sure I make them waste every little thing before I lose. You know what I mean? And Swordsoul is one of the best things to do that. Because again, your teams can overextend, your Yugioh, your Swordsoul monsters on the field and hand, etc., etc. And again, you play all of these hand traps that can actually stop them. So therefore, I think the matchup is not going to be terrible, but I think it's doable. Now let's go on to deck number 4, I believe. Yeah, 4. Deck number 4, Manadome. Now this is one of my favorite decks. I know this deck very, very well, so therefore I can have a better understanding of what I want to do versus this deck. Now there's no surprise and no secret. This deck does lose to Nib, and it does lose to Droll and Lockbird a lot harder. So hitting this deck with a Droll is not a auto win because it depends on what's in their hand, but it does slow them down tremendously. You know what I mean? Like, even if, so like, the thing is, Droll is definitely way better versus this deck than a Nib is. But again, like, it depends on your hand trap lineup. That's the beauty about Swordsoul. You can run as many hand traps as possible, / as many as you want, and still have good enough engine to go, because Swordsoul is literally just the 3 Yugioh, 3 Yugioh, 2 Taya, and 3 Moye with the like 3 searchers. That's it. And then it's just 10 Ys. So therefore you can play a lot of non-engine, if that makes sense. So again, I think it can go back and forth, and like it's very, very, very tricky if Manadome does make a pretty good board, like Baron, SP, plus Dispater, plus the Reframing face down. That can be kind of iffy and kind of hard to like deal with, but like I generally think Swordsoul can, it can still fight against that, because again, like I said, you're gonna have a lot of hand traps in your hand to try to fight against them. You're gonna have your 10 Ys. Like I'm emphasizing the 10 Ys a lot because like the 10 Ys can kind of make and or break a matchup, because it's a free summon and it's a free non-effect monster which you can keep playing with after that. So yeah, I think against Manadome it's pretty good. Going first, you mainly want to try to stop their freaking spell cards from activating, aka their field spells. And again, one of the best monsters to actually use against Manadome is your Sinister Yugioh. That card is fantastic versus them because like it banishes their field spells and it banishes their monsters on summon. So therefore, if they do summon out a Visa Starfrost with a Meek, or you know, with its effect, or a Obsession in the graveyard, you can banish it and don't gotta worry about it. But again, you do have to worry about the brand new Visas Samsara card. That card is actually very, very, very handy. But again, you know, I feel like Swordsoul does have enough gas to actually combat this deck. Going first, you can make a lot of things. And also, oh, I didn't even say, on certain Swordsoul builds, if you summon out Chaofeng, Manadome becomes completely worse. Like, it's very, very, very hard for them to play because like 3 of their main monsters, which is Visa Starfrost, Roomheart, and the new Visas Samsara, those 3 main monsters are all lights. And most of their synchros, like the like new Manadome and the like Visa Synchro, those are also lights. So therefore, you cannot use their effects. So again, depending on your build and depending on the like meta you are, you know, playing in here, that's kind of what you can do. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just my kind of take on Visas. I think it's a pretty okay matchup. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but yeah, I think it's definitely doable. Let's go on to deck number 5. Okay, deck number 5 is Dragon Link, and again, the only thing I feel like you have to watch out for this if you're going first is the Bestials. And then even then, with the Bestials, it can only really target 3 cards in your graveyard, which is your Ecclesia, your Ashuna, and your Vashuda. But even then, we do play the Adara to bring back at least 2 of those cards. So like, yeah, that's the only thing you kind of have to worry about on your turn. But again, this deck will also lose to a Droll and a well-timed Nib. It's very hard for them to actually come back and play after those. So again, most of these cards on this list, it does depend on like the hand traps and the like main deck build that you are making, if that makes sense. So again, Dragon Link does have a really good board when they do go first, summoning out a Disbatter. They can summon a Chaos Angel. They can summon out like all these things. SP Little Knight now if they want to. But I still genuinely think Swordsoul can actually compete against Dragon Link. Do I think it's the easiest? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I do think it's doable. So that's just my take. Let's go on to deck number, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Deck number 6 is Flunderies? Flu. We're gonna call it Flu. This deck is very annoying. It's very annoying. We know it. We hate it. We don't like it. Get it out of here, right? But I genuinely think on this list, our deck has a positive matchup versus Flu. That's just my opinion. You know what I mean? So like, biggest thing, their biggest thing Flu has is Impin plus the like Wind's Trap card or whatever. You know what I mean? The one that could book everything on your field. So like, that's about it. But you can still play around that stuff. You can play through it. And again, big emphasis is your Tenyis. Your Tenyis in your hand can win you most of these matches. Like they are really that good, if that makes sense. So like, again, typical board a Flunderies player will have is like Map plus Impin plus the Trap card face down. And if they're really cheeky, they'll also have the Soaring Winds, I think is what it's called. Which again, if they use their Trap card, they contribute your own monsters. But even then, like, you play so many hand traps, you main deck talents, you main deck so many things you can play past this board. Not effectively easily, but like, it's definitely doable. I think out of everything in this list, Flunderies is definitely the easiest deck to play around if they have a full field of Flunderies-esque things, only because their full field is maybe like 3 cards, maybe 2 at max. So therefore, I think you can play around it. And again, this deck will also lose to Droll and Lockbird. Nib doesn't hurt them because they always have summoning at summon number 4. So Nib won't do too much, but Droll and Lockbird hurts them a lot. Droll hurts and Ghost Ogre hurts a lot also. So we can use those two. And a well-timed Ash is really, really, really good, and Imperm. So keep those in mind, hitting the like proper cards, and you should be good versus this deck. But again, that's just my opinion. Next deck is Branded. You just, so like, half the time it was just, all right, you Ash Blossom Branded Fusion and their turn ends. Nowadays, even if you do that, they can still do a lot of stuff, bro. They can still make big boards, make crazy boards, make Dragoons, etc., etc. So it's kind of it's very hard to actually play around that stuff. Dragoon isn't impossible to play against because we do have a Cheng Ying, and our Cheng Ying can get way bigger than him, and they kind of just beat him up. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. It's rough if they do hit you with the Gimme Puppet lock, because I know some folks are still running that. But it's like, if you were gonna get hit with that regardless, you were gonna lose regardless. If that makes sense. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like you play enough hand traps for this deck, so you can actually fight against it and whatnot. If that's making any sense. So like, I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely doable, and I don't think it's like the worst thing on this list, if that makes sense. Chimera Fusion, or the Chimera deck in general, the deck is so annoying. I'm gonna be honest, this deck is very annoying. I think it's very good, and you can combine it with your Brandon stuff also. But yeah, this deck is super good. Like, it gives them a lot of protection and negation, but you only have to really worry about 2 cards. And those 2 cards are going to be in in their graveyard, which is the Sword Knight, which can negate any card on the field, and the Quaddle, I think is what it's called, Quaddle, Cottontail, whatever it's called, which stops targeting from their fusion. So, but other than that, like, the deck is solid, bro. Like, the fact that, like, it can stop you from doing that, it can take a card out of your hand, so then you don't start off with 6, you start off with 5 cards, and like, their recursion for this deck is crazy. And then that's not even counting the branded stuff or the freaking runic stuff if you are running those kind of builds. So I think this deck is very solid, but again, I don't think it's like a crazy deck to where, oh, you can't fight against it, you can't win, etc., etc. You know what I mean? I just think you have to hit the correct cards, then you're good to like go from there. You know what I mean? Another deck I do want to talk about is Labyrinth. Now, I'm gonna be honest, bro. This deck is so stupid, right? Win the dice roll, and then just do what you gotta do after, bro. You know what I mean? Because like, oh my god, they can main deck D-Barrier. They can main deck Eradicator, bro. They main deck Skill Drain. They main deck all these things. Skill Drain isn't such a bad card because, again, we do have Vashuda. You know, Vashuda can just bounce it back, see you later. But the main card you have to worry about is D-Barrier and Eradicator. D-Barrier is kind of hit or miss because, yes, they call Synchros, most of it is gone, right? But we do have links that we can play, and with the introduction of SP Little Knight, it makes things a lot easier. But with this, I'm just gonna say this stun deck it's very hard to fight against if you do lose the dice roll. But if you go first, I'm very confident you can stop them from setting up and doing what you want to do. Making a Baron first turn plus a Chang plus a Shishao plus a Sinister is all good things that you can and that you should be doing. You know what I mean? Or even just a Baron plus a Sinister. That should be enough half of the like time, because again, they used it like big welcome Labyrinth. You want to just banish it, therefore it's not in the graveyard. Plus, again, hand traps really matter against this deck. Droll won't really do too much versus this deck. Ash hurts the big Labyrinth. Ghost Spell hurts big Labyrinth. Nib doesn't do much, you know what I mean? Valor kind of hurts a little bit, but yeah, other than that, I think this can kind of go back and forth, but I think I would definitely put it in the Labyrinth column a little bit more, like 55-45 kind of thing, just by a little bit, just because for the fact that they can main deck all of these powerful cards, aka D-Barrier, Eradicator, Viruset, etc. Another deck, Unchained. This deck, I don't know like too much about Unchained. I just know they can link with your cards during your turn, and they can make a Caesar and whatnot. But just know this deck does lose to like Nib and like etc, etc. So if they don't make a Caesar, Nib kills them. If they do, you got to play around Caesar. And Caesar is such a good card. I don't have too much to say about Unchained. It's one of the best decks in the format next to like Rescue Ace. So yeah, just watch out, I guess. You know what I mean? But overall, I think Swordsoul can still fight against this deck. Again, if I was more knowledgeable with most of this, most of these cards on here, I can give you a better like, oh, just do this and do that. Like when it came to like Manadome, when it came to like Flunderies. But for the decks that I do understand, I got you. For the decks that I don't understand, I will learn most of them even more. But I know this deck is very crazy, so gotta watch out for that. Another deck we do have to watch out for is Phantom Knights, bro. Phantom Knights has become even better with the Horus cards, bro. Like, this deck is crazy. Like, it's so good. And the best part is, I know about this deck very, very well. So therefore, I know how to combat against it, and I know what to expect from it. It's very, very hard to like properly hand trap against this deck. Because don't get me wrong, you can hand trap against this deck, sure, but it's hard to hand trap them correctly, if that makes sense. Like, one of your like, if you have an Ash like in your hand, if they summon out the Link 2, Burning Abyss. Do not Ash that. Do not Imperm. Do not Valor. Do not do anything to it besides Ghost Ogre. Because when it sends a monster from the deck to graveyard, it sends it for cost. So therefore, your hand trap won't do anything. You know what I mean? But a good choke point you do want to hit is the Rusty Bardiche. When they summon that, if you want to nib then and there, that's the best time to nib. That's a good target to Ash. It's a good target to Imperm because that card also sends and it sets a Fog Blade down for them to defend themselves. You know what I mean? So stopping that card's pretty good. And don't get me started on the freaking horror stuff, bro. I think Droll is definitely way better now versus Phantom Knights because of the Horus package. Because, you know, if they go activate the M SETI, you know what I mean? Search for the sarcophagus, and then you like Droll. I'm pretty sure the sarcophagus cannot use the effect. Let me see. Oh, never mind. Okay, so yeah, you don't draw anything. But yeah, like, stopping the like M SETI is pretty important against them. But yeah, I think Droll does do pretty well against them because like, if they have the M SETI in, I mean, again, like if they have the M SETI in their hand, they're gonna use that effect first before anything else, and then play because they do want to try to get their sarcophagus to their hand so they can start milling cards from their hand and whatnot. But I think Swordsoul can actually play against this pretty well. A good card to fight against them is Chang Ying. Since they do banish a lot of cards from their graveyard, Chang's effect can actually trigger and banish cards from their field and graveyard, which is non-targeting, so keep that in mind. And the last deck I do want to talk about is the Tier Element. Man, man, just good luck. Good luck, bro. They have the shufflers, they got this, they got that. Just good luck. All I gotta say, bro. Like, the deck is crazy, and like with the horror stuff, it makes it even better. Just good luck. That's all I gotta say. But anyways, man, hope you guys did enjoy this. I kind of went off script a little bit. I don't use scripts normally, but kind of wanted to give my opinion. But overall, yes, I think Swordsoul can compete. Do I think it's hard and rough? Yes, but I think we can do it. Because remember, Swordsoul, best deck.